Namaskar. A warm welcome to the 74th episode of Granthyatra. Today we are going to discuss the book Yugant, The End of an Era, written by Iravati Karve. This book is an analysis of Mahabharat with a sociological and anthropological lens and done by an objective and logical mind. For this, Karve has used the edition published after a great deal of research by the Bhandarkar Institute. This edition of Mahabharat is based on the oldest available manuscript derived after studying thousands of manuscripts in different scripts. Even from this edition, Karve has not taken into consideration those portions of the narrative that seem to be supernatural, divine, miraculous, and which highlight a particular characteristic of a character but which are not essential for the progress of the main story. Karve's analysis, after discarding all these irrelevant details of what might have happened and why it may have happened so, has resulted in this book, Yugant. Iravati Karve was born in the year 1905 in Myanmar. She completed her school and college education in Pune. Later, she went to Germany for her highest education. The focus of her research was anthropology, sociology, and psychology. In addition, she also wrote light essays. Indian culture, and especially the culture of Maharashtra, was her favorite subject. Yuganta was published in 1971. Karve believes that although some aspects of the Indian culture prevalent during the Mahabharat era are still prevalent, many other aspects vanished after the Mahabharat war. That is why she calls the war between the Kaurav and Pandav princes and a few years after that as the end of an era. The people in Mahabharata are real people of flesh and blood. They quietly endure the fruits of their actions and cannot change the direction of their lives. The incidents and the emotions of the characters in Mahabharat belong to the plane of human existence, says Karve. We do not see God or any other force delivering people of their difficulties or despair. Karve writes, there is a strong foundation of thinking and behavior behind all this. All actions are performed with a sense of duty as a way of life and often because they are unavoidable. There is never an expectation of attaining happiness from these actions. Whatever is gained is accompanied by much loss. In the later period, the definitions of truth, valor, purity, and devotion were taken to the extreme. The literature that emerged in the later period gave up the harsh boundaries of human life and created a dreamlike vision. Karve argues that although the society in the Mahabharat period was divided into four classes, those who tilled the land and tended to cattle belonged to the third class of Vaishyas. Only those who served as domestic helps belonged to the fourth class of Shudras, and their numbers were low. There were rules of conduct for each class, especially for the warrior and ruling class of Kshatriyas, and those were diligently followed. Several city-states existed happily side by side in the Indian subcontinent. The king who performed the Rajasuya or Ashwamedh sacrifice would go on a war campaign, defeat other kings and collect dues, but would not confiscate the kingdom of the defeated king. Karve believes that the practice of invading other kingdoms and appropriating their lands was a later development. Similarly, the religious beliefs during the Mahabharat period are closer to those of the Vedas and the Brahmanas than to that of the Puranas, she says. There are no references to idols or temples in Mahabharat. Religion in Mahabharat focuses on fire sacrifices. Indra, Sun, and Rudra were gods, and fire carried their offerings to them. These and other reasons lead Karve to believe that an era came to an end after the end of Mahabharat. The writer shines a light on characters in Mahabharat one by one and describes his or her nature, value systems, and aspirations. The first character described in the book is Bheeshma. Karve raises the question whether Bhishma, who was famous for his vow of celibacy and for giving up his right to the throne, got carried away by the responsibilities which he shouldered for no reason. She holds him responsible for the injustice meted out to the princesses of Kashi, Amba, Ambika and Ambalika, whom he abducted for Vichitravirya, and to the princesses Gandhari and Kunti, whom he sought in marriage for the disabled princes Dhritarashtra and Pandu. Similarly, Bhishma did not try to stop Draupadi's disrobing in the Kaurava court. Whatever Bhishma did in his life was not for himself but for others. Can he be then blamed for these actions? Karve tackles this question from another angle. She says that when a person acts for his own benefit, there are natural limitations for his actions. His actions are assessed with scrutiny by others. But when someone adopts the role of a benefactor, one who has sacrificed selfishness, his actions are not bound by natural boundaries. Did Bhishma suffer from this syndrome? However, she gives him credit for making one last attempt to stop the Kaurav-Pandav war, which is why he insisted on becoming the commander of the Kaurav army and kept Karna away from the war. The war lasted for 18 days. Of these, there was no real fight put up for the first 10 days when Bhishma was the commander. Karve says that Bhishma was unlucky in every aspect and she questions what he achieved from his vows. The next character is that of Gandhari. Karve has developed this character in the form of a story. The readers are introduced to Princess Gandhari, who has undertaken the arduous journey from the remote mountainous kingdom of Gandhar to Hastinapur for marriage. But soon her world is shattered when she learns that her chosen groom is blind since birth. Karve does not provide the details of Gandhari's intervening life. The readers meet her again when all her sons are dead in the war. When thinking back about her life, Gandhari says, "My every child was a pain for me. I no longer had a life of my own. Their moments of happiness were my moments of happiness, and their sorrows were my sorrows. That's how the life was spent." Now that all her children were dead, she thinks there is no more anxiety on their behalf, and so her mind is calm, but soon realizes that as long as a blind husband is alive, it is impossible for her to transcend happiness and sorrow. In the end, she accepts a life in the woods in the company of Dhritarashtra, Kunti and Vidur. When the four of them decide to give up their life and not flee the fire burning the woods, she remains beside Dhritarashtra to her last breath. The next character is Kunti. Karve wonders if she enjoyed even an iota of happiness in her life. Kunti's fate was decided even before she was born because her father had promised to give away his firstborn to his friend in adoption. Her adopted father made her serve the short-tempered ascetic Durvas. The ascetic taught her a secret mantra, and Kunti did not have the maturity to wait for its usage until after her wedding. She gave birth to a son who had to be abandoned. Karve says that Kunti paid for the sin of giving him birth and the injustice of abandoning him from the moment he was born till his death. However, Karve holds Kunti's father responsible for this sorry state of affairs. One father gave her up in adoption. This pain was the result of that act. The second father got her married to a person who had a disability. The pain arising from this marriage was added to her original pain, and Kunti carried it all her life, Karve writes. The death of a tribal woman and her sons in the house of lack, Draupadi's wedding to 5 brothers, and her sermon to Yudhishthir before the war were some of the harsh decisions taken by Kunti for the welfare of her sons. She was a woman who was acutely vigilant about her place and her rights, and overtly proud of her lineage. Life was a struggle for her, and she did not deter in this fight, writes Karve. The fourth character in Yugant is Vidur. Karve minutely studies this character who has been somewhat neglected in most of the literature based on Mahabharat. And then she raises some unexpected questions. Vidur's love for Pandav brothers is obvious. Until the time they became strong following support from the Panchalas, Vidur quietly protected them. Vidur was learned but was aware of his limitations. He does not seem to grieve for being denied the right to the throne. Yet, his life appears sad and full of despair, writes Karve. Given his fondness for Yudhishthir, his righteousness or loyalty to Dharma, and Yudhishthir believed to be an incarnation of Lord Dharma, leads Karve to wonder if Yudhishthir was Kunti's son from Vidur. The next character is Draupadi. Karve begins this chapter by comparing the characters of Sita in Ramayana to that of Draupadi. She says that Draupadi was the prestige of the Pandava brothers, a living symbol of their unity and inseparability. Even after her humiliation in the Kaurav court, she saved the Pandavas from annihilation by securing their release with the help of boons granted by Dhritarashtra. When comparing the years spent in the woods by Sita and Draupadi, Karve says that Sita's exile was poetic, beautiful, and spent as a lover. On the other hand, Draupadi's exile was that of a woman burning in the fire of humiliation and spent in the course of duty. Although Karve refutes the allegations that the Mahabharat war was caused by Draupadi, she criticizes Draupadi's conduct in the Mayasabha, in the court of dice, and after the slaying of Kichak. Her argument that instead of showing off her erudition by asking a difficult question in the Kaurav court, she should have pleaded with her elders as their daughter-in-law is difficult to accept. When unfolding Karan's character, Karve describes how his life kept revolving around the question of his identity. She feels that although Karan's ambition to show off his fighting skills at the competition arranged by Dronacharya for the princess was acceptable, his challenge to Arjun, who was much younger than Karn, for a duel without provocation was indicative of Karan's impatient nature and his propensity to swing to extremes. She writes, "These drawbacks in Karn's nature are painfully apparent on 2 or 3 occasions. In the grip of passion, he would give in to instantaneous anger and act unreasonably. Impatience is in a way natural to the warrior class, but this impatience should not be petty. That was the unwritten rule. Karn was not able to abide by it." The most thought-provoking chapter in this book is devoted to the character of Krishna. Karve has analyzed the difference between the character of Krishna as it appears in Mahabharat as against its depiction in the Puranas. Krishna, who appears in Mahabharat, is a grown-up person who helps Pandavas at every step, who strives to maintain the unity of the Yadavas, a great diplomat, a brave warrior, and a skilled charioteer. He is wise and foresighted, but he is not omniscient. Karve speculates that all the miracles mentioned in Mahabharat that attribute a divine nature to Krishna must be extrapolations. She says that the first 3 chapters of Bhagavad Gita must be the philosophy originally propounded by Krishna, and later portions must be the additions made after the advent of the Bhakti cult. Karve also points out that although Krishna had no desire to be a king, he strived for the title of Vasudev. By citing several examples in Mahabharat, Karve surmises that Vasudev must have been a position endowed with some privileges. At the conclusion of the chapter, Karve says that Krishna did everything either as part of his duty or out of his love for the Pandavas, especially Arjun. He enjoyed good things in his life but remained detached from it all. We have with us today a researcher of Sanskrit literature and writer, Anupama Kulkarni, who will tell us her perspective on the position occupied by the book Yugant among the vast literature in Marathi based on Mahabharat.
नमस्कार. व्यासोच्छिष्टम जगत सर्वम. महाभारत हे प्राथमिक वाङ्मय. त्याने पुढची कित्येक शतकं काव्य, नाटके, कथा, कादंबऱ्या, पुराणे आणि टीका वाङ्मय यांना खाद्य पुरवलं आहे. युगांत हे इरावती कर्वे यांचे पुस्तक वाचताना संस्कृत कवी भास यांच्या महाभारतावरील 6 रूपक एकांकिका आहेत त्या विशेषत्वाने आठवतात. महाभारतातील घटनाकडे एका वेगळ्याच दृष्टिकोनातून भासाने पाहिले. इरावती कर्वे यांनी महाभारत वाचताना मनात उत्कटतेने दाटून आलेले विचार दडपून न टाकता दुसऱ्यांना सांगावे या हेतूने युगांत लिहिला आहे. मैत्री, आकांक्षा, वैर अशा अनेक भावनांना दृढ करण्यासाठी केलेले प्रयत्न आणि शेवटी एका विशिष्ट परिणामाकडे जाणारा त्यांचा शेवट हे जाणून त्या व्यक्तींची व्यथा स्वतःची व्यथा होते आणि हे मानवी दुःख मनाला टोचत राहतं. हे लेखिकेचं म्हणणं युगांतामधील लेखातून जाणवत राहतं. महाभारत ही त्या काळचे जीवन आणि विचार यांचे खोल व्यापक चित्रण आहे. या दृष्टीने इरावतीबाईंच्या युगांतमधील व्यक्तिरेखा प्रातिनिधिक स्वरूपाच्या अशा आहेत. गांधारी, कुंती, धृतराष्ट्र, विदूर, कर्ण, कृष्ण, द्रौपदी यासारख्या भिन्न परिस्थितीतल्या वेगळी दुःखे, आशा, वैर, मैत्र यांतील वेगळेपणा दर्शवणाऱ्या व्यक्तिरेखा आहेत. भीमाचा त्याग, गांधारीच्या आकांक्षा, तिला गृहीत धरणं, दुर्योधनाने कर्णाला मैत्र असूनही सेव्य सेवक भाव बाळगणारे, विदुराचे सुख असूनही उदात्त पण विषण्ण आयुष्य, क्रौर्यातून आलेला मयसभेचा जन्म आणि फाशाच्या उन्मादात झालेला अंत अशा अनेक गोष्टींवर लेखिकेने अगदी वेगळा विचार केला आहे. जयायम अजयाकारो असं धर्म सांगतो. यातून मानवी जीवनाचा वैफल्य हा स्थायी भाव दिसून येतो. महाभारतातील प्रत्येक व्यक्ती पराजित आणि निराश आहे. महाभारतातील माणसे हाडामासांची विशिष्ट समाजात राहणारी आहेत. ती जी कृत्य करतात त्याची फळे निमूटपणे भोगत असतात. आयुष्याच्या ठरलेल्या फेऱ्यातून त्यांना सुटका नाही. सुखाचे, ऐश्वर्याचे, भरभराटीचे, पण दुःखाचे दिवस आणि सर्वनाशाचे सुद्धा. ते भीष्म, अंबा, धर्म प्रत्यक्ष कृष्णालाही चुकवता आले नाही. व्यक्तीच्या आशा, आकांक्षा, तडफड, निराशा या सर्वांचे सुंदर अभ्यासपूर्ण विवेचन युगांतामध्ये आहे आणि तेही मानवी पातळीवर. त्यात दैवी शक्ती, अमानुष चमत्कार किंवा देवत्वाने संकटातून वाचवले असे कुठेही आढळत नाही. लेखिकेचे हे पुस्तक महाभारतातील इतर वाङ्मयात आगळे वेगळे ठरते.
I'm sure you will love reading Yuganta that provides an objective and logical analysis of Mahabharat, an epic that is considered to be indicative of a romantic era in India's past and that is deeply rooted in the collective psyche of Indians. Do tell us about your reactions to this book. We shall meet in the 75th episode of Granthyatra to study 2 plays by a writer who shines in the fields of poetry, novel and drama in Marathi literature. Until then, keep reading.